Okay, folks. First of all, Michelle's going to take a picture, so smile. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. So tonight's class is the investment piece of retirement. You know, how to put together a portfolio leading into and going far into retirement. So this class can be used and implemented by anybody, whether you're 60, 40, or 20 years old. And there's a few there that are in the 20-year range, so good for them. They might be retiring at age 40, for example. So it's the idea that putting together this portfolio is going to serve your needs best for the next few decades. In the past, I have combined this presentation with the withdrawal strategies, how to pull money out, where to pull it out, how to understand taxes as you pull it out, and rebalancing and all of those things. Well, I've separated that. So tonight, we're not talking about withdrawing money or from what accounts. That's going to be all next week. So we'll really get into that in more depth. Tonight is about putting together that portfolio in the right way. Cost effective, tax effective, basically put yourself in exactly the place you want to be going forward. So first of all, I posed some questions to some of you last week. Out there and identify the cost of your portfolio, the cost of some mutual funds that you own, some life insurance products that you own. Any comments, any questions, concerns? What did you find out? Anyone want to share? So apparently you're all doing great. Oh, go ahead. 0.06, wonderful. And fund. It had to be a stock index fund because it was 06, right? Has anybody ever found any mutual funds that cost more than 1%? Yeah. My highest was 1.01%. Okay. And again, in your mind, you're thinking, that's not so bad. Yes, sir. Okay, well, that's not too bad. Okay, let's look at paying 1% a year on your investment portfolio. Let's say you average 1%. In your mind, you're thinking, you know, that's not so bad, right? 1% of my portfolio, how can that be? Well, reframe that question. What if you're averaging 6% a year? What is 1% divided by 6? That's a big number. In other words, you could end up losing out on 25 or 30% of your portfolio because of that 1% annual charge or more. How many people have an advisor? It's okay. So that advisor's getting paid, and of course, the investments that the advisor puts you in, those are getting paid too. So when you have an advisor, well, you have multiple layers of cost. When you have insurance products, you have multiple layers of cost. We'll talk about that a little bit tonight, because tonight what I'm going to try to convince many of you is that you can become your own financial advisor. You can. It's quite possible. You're capable. And many people in this room have done that. Who's done that? Yeah, a lot of hands. And you think to yourself, well, you know, it looks pretty hard. It looks pretty, I don't know. Well, at first it may, because you may not understand it clearly. As you start to see a more clear picture, you might decide, you know what, this shit isn't that hard. I can do this. Let's get started. So the big numbers recap, right? Anybody new here tonight was not here last week? Okay, so some of this is a recap. If you would like last week's PowerPoint, send me an email. My card's up here, and I'll send you last week's recap to review information from last week as you review this week. Same this week. I will send this PowerPoint to you if you request it via email from me. Okay? The big numbers. What are your yearly expenses? What's that fixed income? Money coming in every month. It's like a pension or a part-time job or an immediate annuity, maybe a Social Security benefit. What's the total amount of the portfolio? Where's all of your money, your liquid money, what's it combined? What is that big number? And then what is 4% of that portfolio? Get those 4 numbers down and start working them. Start figuring out where you are in relation to where you want to be. Any questions on those 4 questions that need answers? Because they're big, folks. They are big. And they can reduce stress as you enter retirement. That is correct. So if you start to plan and think about, okay, I'm going to retire, what fixed income am I going to have? Am I going to start taking a Social Security benefit then? Am I going to have a pension? If I'm going to have a pension, what is that amount going to be? Am I projecting some part-time work? What do I project that amount to be? What kind of fixed income that you believe you can count on every month, and then you decide how much of the portfolio you need and whether or not you can pull out less than 4% for your needs early in retirement. And again, we'll talk more and more about that in the coming weeks. So, Investing 101. I give an 8-week class on this, and I'm giving it to you in about an hour and 15 minutes. Okay? So grab a hold of something, because here we go. First, take a moment and read that. Bryant Quinn has been a finance writer for decades, Wall Street. She knows. She's not an exaggerator. That 99.9 is right. That 0.1 is what we'll be talking about tonight. Remind yourself that the financial services industry creates products for the financial services industry. And then they market those products to you in a way that tries to convince you to give your money to them. So, created to make money off of you. That's what they do. Those products and services, they're not for you. They're for them. They are. All the marketing aside, the financial services industry has squeezed between you and your investments. So you got you on one end, the investments that you want to own, stocks, bonds, real estate, and then they've gotten in between to try to take as much as they can before it hits the investments. And then on the way back, they also try to take a piece as it comes back to you. So the goal is, it should always be the goal is, how can we get them either totally out or almost totally out of the picture? So we end up with most of the return on our investments, which we should have because we're the ones taking the risk. So just understand how you can avoid the crap and how you can own and buy the good stuff that's going to serve your needs for decades to come. Knowledge will set you straight, right? When I first read my first financial book, Wealth Without Risk, by Charles Gibbons in 1989, it opened my eyes to everything I was doing wrong. And luckily, I was willing, because I was a young man, I was willing to say, okay, Finley, you screwed up. How can we fix this? I could have said, oh, no, I'm doing it right. I could have done that, because people do that. You know, it's like they get defensive. No, so we got to be open to this message. We have to be open to the idea that maybe there's a better way of doing it. Because here's the truth, there is. We know there is, and it's been done for decades. The problem is it doesn't benefit the industry for you to know that. Hence the value of this class. Obstacles, right? There's a lot of fees in that in-between zone. Loads are commissions in the financial industry. You should never, ever, ever pay a load. Under any there is no reason, absolutely no reason to ever pay a load. So if you see a Class A or a Class B or Class C load at the end of your mutual fund, let's say on a statement, and it's going to show it B, C, or D, then you paid a load. Stop doing that. That load goes to a salesman. Doesn't do anything for your investment Absolutely nothing. So never pay a load. I would generally tell you never pay commissions. There's no reason to pay commissions. There isn't. There's no reason to include brokers in between you and your investments. And then there's expense ratio, and expense ratio is how you get charged for a mutual fund. You want to get the ratio as low as you possibly can. 0.06. That's a great cost for an index mutual fund. And you can get even lower. John Deere people? Anybody John Deere? Yeah. 500 index. What's that charging you within your 401k? Anybody? Better than that, sir? Well, it's 0.01 unless they've changed it. But it's 0.01. What that means is you get to invest because it's a special deal. They've worked because of the pool of assets within the plan. You're getting to invest in 500 largest companies in the world almost at cost with almost nothing except that very small 0.01 fee for the expense ratio. So that's awesome. Now, that's unusual, but it's awesome. You're looking to drop that expense ratio as much as you can to increase your returns over time. In other words, you got to get in there big inside your 401ks, your 403bs. Where are the low-cost options? Many have them, some of you don't. If you don't have them, raise hell and get them. So the helpers, fee-based advisors. You want to stay away from fee-based advice. What does that mean? Well, that means they get paid behind the scenes. They're getting paid by other people to push products and services your way. So if they're getting paid by someone else, who do you think they're working for? Somebody else. So who's a fee-based advisor? Well, most advisors out there. Your local Edward Jones guy, Ameriprise, Transamerica, there's a whole lot of them out there. Now, why is it most? Because that's where the money's at. They can make the most money as a fee-based advisor. And where is that money coming from? Well, it's coming from us, the clients. The company's not paying them extra. It's you paying them extra as it comes out of the products and services that they push upon you that was pushed on them. And by the way, I'm not saying these are bad people. I'm not saying they're doing anything illegal. What I'm saying is they're taking too much of your money and you end up with less. Emotions. This is something that we also don't hear enough of. The number one problem for just about all of us is us. It's us. It's the individual. We're the ones who either lack the education and we don't seek out the education, or we let our emotions drive our decisions. We let fear stop us from doing things. We let our greed and overconfidence make decisions that we should not make with our money. We are really the biggest decider here. We're the ones who get to decide whether to have a fee-based advisor. We're the ones who get to decide, you know, the fees in our investments because we select them. We're the ones who decide whether or not our emotions are going to be part of the equation or if we're going to harness them and take them away. Us. And of course, the media. Almost everything you hear from the media is crap. Just as a reminder, if that's not clear to you, I want it to be clear. People are on television spouting off every day, telling you about the future of this and that, and sometimes they cause people to be fearful, right? Because that's what they're trying to do, is reach your emotions. Sometimes they're trying to feed your greed. But at the end of the day, it's all just noise, and you just want to ignore it. And here's the good news. You can't ignore it. It means nothing. So you don't have to listen to all the gurus on television to find out the truth, because the truth isn't there. Here's a good example, good 20-year time period. So we have a multitude of research studies showing very similar numbers. What you see is index of the S&P 500 largest companies in the world, and an index of bonds, high-quality bonds in the U.S. So if you'd invested for 20 years, from January 1, 1990 to the end of the first decade, which, by the way, was a good decade for stocks and a very bad decade. That's why it's a good time period, because it shows the good and the bad. You would have averaged 8.2% by owning the S&P 500 index at no cost. You'd have returned 7.01, a bond index, at no cost. Well, the problem is there's always cost. It's hard to get totally free, although John Deere comes pretty damn close to that 500 index. This is what the average stock investor earned in America. The average bond investor. They didn't even earn half the market return. Not even half. How can that be? Well, there's a couple reasons, two pretty good reasons. One, the industry. The industry's taken their cut, and it's a big cut. And then the other piece, again, is us. Our emotions. As we try to time the market, we try to get in, we try to get out. We dance in and out like we know something that we don't. And we end up with less. So by harnessing our emotions and squeezing out most of those helpers in between us and our investments, we can achieve market returns minus very, very small cost with that expense ratio. If you can achieve benchmark returns, you're going to be one of the best investors in the world. Right here, sitting in Cedar Falls, Iowa. It's achievable. So to become that informed investor, how to do it? Well, get market returns at the lowest possible cost. That's it. Identify entire markets. So for a good example, the total stock market index fund at Vanguard. It owns the entire U.S. market. Large companies like the S&P 500, mid-sized companies, and small companies. The entire market at 0.04. A wonderful fund, thanks to a guy by the name of John Bogle. Index funds are the solution for the vast majority of people. We are lucky. So who would agree with me that in the United States, for the most part, if you're wealthy, you have advantages in many, 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 many ways that the average working stiff doesn't have. Everybody agree with me on that one? Oh, yeah. Guess what? Not in investing. Thanks to John Bogle, who started Vanguard in 1975, he built Vanguard as a not-for-profit investment company. So when money came in, instead of bonuses going up and paychecks going up, the cost of investments go down. He built the company for the investor. So the fees have continued to come down over time in some very dramatic ways. And because of that, you and I get to invest at market return almost, which is just as good as pretty much anybody in the United States. Even large institutions like IPERS and other pension plans, they don't have any better opportunities than you and I. They don't. As a matter of fact, they do worse more times than not because they're paying financial people millions and millions of dollars. IPERS happens to be paying about $150 million a year. So we are lucky, but we need to take advantage of this opportunity. It's not going to just show up in your lap. You got to maybe show up for a class. Diversify. Diversify all over the world to reduce your risk. So, for example, somebody says, oh, I think Tesla's going to be amazing. Dude, you don't know. The market knows more than you do. And when you're trading on Tesla or Facebook or Twitter or whatever the thing is that you think is going to be amazing, marijuana stock, the market's already responded to that long before you did. So you're taking a lot of risk and the potential for loss is very high. So by diversifying, by owning thousands and thousands of stocks in the United States and overseas and bonds as well, you can reduce your risk dramatically. Because it's not just about getting a good return, it's about not losing a hell of a lot of money. Select an asset allocation that's right for you. So that's a big deal, in case anybody's wondering. Asset allocation. You should go to bed at night thinking asset allocation, asset allocation, asset allocation. Your asset allocation and what your investments cost you are going to tell us what your future returns are going to be. So that's incredibly important. And I would tell you the majority of time when I ask people, what's your asset allocation? They just give me that look. You know, what's your portfolio costing you? Right? Those two things are huge. So you want to know that, because those two things are going to tell us your future. So leading into retirement, what are you going to do to combat inflation? So a lot of people, they get all worked up about the volatility of markets, right? Stock markets do go down sometimes. Well, they don't seem to get too worked up, or not worked up enough, about inflation. Well, inflation generally just does this. And if you don't combat inflation, your money is going to shrink in value. And that's going to cost you a great deal over time. What is your risk tolerance? You know, how much can you handle when markets go down? What I've learned is the more educated you are on the topic, when you start to understand how markets work, your risk tolerance can go up, because you understand there's more than one type of risk. It's not just the volatility of one market over another, but there's inflation risk. There are many types of risks that you're going to have to deal with over time. Take some time to understand the big picture as you decide how much to have in stocks versus bonds and real estate and cash. What's your tax situation now? So your tax situation may be different, the same, or very different as you go into retirement. You want to take some time to understand your tax situation now so you have a plan for it later as you retire. What's your time horizon, right? Talked about this maybe briefly last week. Your time horizon should be to death and maybe beyond, not till retirement. What can you have to take you all the way till you're no longer? And some of you may think, well, dude, I don't know that. Okay, well then plan for a long life. And some of you may think, yeah, but I may die tomorrow. Well, what did we say last week? Your problems are over. Focus on a long life. Plan for that, because if you don't, you could end up old and broke, and nobody wants to be there. 4 concepts to know. Modern portfolio theory. Real simple, don't complicate it. Think of a stew. You put in different ingredients to a stew. If you throw in a jalapeno and serve that stew, people aren't going to like it. It's way too hot. But if you throw in some meat, some potatoes, some vegetables, and maybe some herbs, boy, it could be just right. So modern portfolio theory does the same thing. We take different asset classes. We have emerging markets, which could be a jalapeno. And we take some developed markets, and we have the U.S. stock market and the U.S. bond market, maybe some real estate. We put them together, and we got ourselves a wonderful stew that can serve you for decades to come. The efficient market hypothesis, simple. It really isn't hard. It's just a matter of acknowledging it. It's the idea that the market knows all the information and stuff that you even imagine it might know that is available, that's public knowledge. Doesn't mean it's right. Market's wrong plenty, but the market is trading at every moment based on all available information, and information's not available with insider trading cheaters. So the market reflects that. So when you and I come to that marketplace, we should not think that somehow we have an advantage over all of that, because we don't. We don't. So we shouldn't be trading on individual stocks, for example, thinking somehow I know more than that market does. You don't. Neither do I. We accept the efficient market, so we own the market. We own all the brains, all that information by owning the market. And all the people that trade within that market, including a guy by the name of Warren Buffett. He gets to work for us. He is our employee. I love saying that. Understand recency bias is just the emotion of us where when something's going down, we think it's going to go down forever. Oh my God, it's collapsing. Well, no, chill, it's not. It's going to go, oh my God, I got to get in. It's herd behavior. It's very easy to fall into that. And by doing that, we end up going too way or the other with our emotions, and that can very easily cripple our portfolio. So understanding this, accepting the fact that we have emotions, and we take some time to understand those emotions so we don't let them hurt us and our portfolio. And then reversion to the mean goes right with recency bias. It reverts back to its historical mean. U.S. stock markets average 10.3% a year, last 90 some years. So you think, okay, but the market has been going down 8% over the last 2 years, let's say. Well, what's more likely, it going down further or going back up? Very likely going back up. It's going to revert back to its historical average. The opposite can happen. Market's been up 12%, 18%, 20% last 3 years. What's more likely going to happen? It's going to revert back. Now, we don't know when. It can revert back or forward over a 2, 3, 5, 6 year time period, but that's what happens. Nothing goes to the moon and nothing goes to the bottom. So by understanding reversion to the mean, understanding recency bias, we can better prepare when our emotions start to think something's going to just collapse or something's going to just go amazing. No, it's going to go up, it's going to go down, it's going to go up, sideways, down, sideways, up, and that's how markets work. Some basics. How much do you allocate to stocks? So let me see a show of hands. How many of you are very clear on how much you want to allocate to stocks in your portfolio? Good, that's great. And are you there? Yes, that's great. So that's where you want to be. How much do I, because there isn't some perfect answer here. In other words, one person may say, I want 70% of my portfolio in stocks. Other person may say, I want 50%. Okay, where are you? So keep this in mind. If you own managed funds, right? Funds that aren't index funds, and it's a stock managed fund. Does anybody own a stock managed fund in here? Okay. So that stock managed fund isn't all stocks. So don't think that that is 100% stocks, because what happens is a managed fund has a manager who holds cash back. So cash held back is waiting to go in the market. And that can be 6, 8, 10, maybe 12% of cash. So you could own a managed fund that could have 10% in cash, only 90% in stock. So be aware of that when you own managed funds versus an index fund, which if it owns stock, it's all in stocks. That's where you should be. Yes, sir.
Explain the theory besides the theory of some of the managed funds will hold multiple funds that have a wide variety of assets.
Okay.
So is that just when you refer to complex investments, is that what you're talking about?
There's a lot of diversity out there. So I'll try to explain some.
If I go into a fund, I was able to find, say, 12 different expense ratios.
So in that case, that fund owns many other mutual funds. And those mutual funds each have an expense ratio. So a managed fund, that manager may try to pick different sectors of an economy to own or different individual stocks that he thinks are going to win or lose. Here's a dirty little secret that if you really study the issue, a lot of managed funds, they mainly own markets. So they'll own maybe 90% of the market within that managed fund, and then they're going to take a shot on a few small pieces to try to beat the market, because they know the odds are so much against them that, okay, I'm not going to try to outguess the market in all these places. I'm only going to try to outguess the market in a very few, because if I do that and I own the market elsewhere, I'm going to beat the market. Now, still, most of them fail to do that, but many have gone to this point because it's so hard to beat the market. And why is it so hard? Well, two main reasons. They're trading with other smart people. So managed funds are trading with other managed. The market is made up of these people. 90+% of the market are professionals. They're all smart, but they're all trying to beat each other. So that's hard all by itself. And then when you add in fees, well, half of them with fees, more of them lose. And then the next year, it's a different mix. And with the fees, they lose. And the next year, it's a different mix. And with the fees, they lose. And over time, that's where managed funds are going to be loser for people like you and I. So when I said this is for everybody, I meant that tongue in cheek. It's true. You want to pick your percent to have in stocks. Now, some people may say 0. I would tell you that's a mistake. Some people may say 30%. That would be on the low end, meaning at the bare minimum, for almost everybody, you should have at least 30% stocks, because if you have less than 30% stocks, your portfolio could actually be more risky with no stocks, because stocks work in a different way than bonds and cash during different cycles within the economy. Now, some of you may go higher. So personally, I'm an 80-20 guy. I keep 80% of my portfolio in stocks. I'm comfortable with that. And I rebalance when I hit 90% stocks or 70% stocks. I know what I want. I make sure that's where I'm at. You want to figure out what you want, you think is right for you, and then make sure that portfolio reflects that. We'll talk about it. Somewhere between 30 and 80, we know historically is a pretty good rule of thumb. You start going above 80, the actual extra return isn't all that much, but you're taking different degrees of extra risk. So for example, personally, I would always rebalance at 90% back to 80. I wouldn't go beyond 90 in many cases, unless I was very young. So the 20-year-olds back there, stocks, baby, 100%. Consider pensions and Social Security. Big bonds, big bonds. We'll talk about that. So what are big bonds? Well, IPRS is a big bond. A pension, John Deere has pensions. A pension can be seen as a big bond that's going to pay out the rest of your life. IPRS can be seen the same way. Social Security can be seen the same way. So if you have a pension, or you and the spouse have a pension, you might very well consider taking a lot more risk by owning more stocks, because that big bond called a pension can serve as your allocation within your portfolio as you go into retirement. So really consider that process as it plays out. That pension can be part of your bond allocation, hence owning more stocks than maybe you might be comfortable doing. Because what we know is your stocks historically give you a much higher return on your money. It's not even close. When you look at returns in stocks versus bonds and cash and other kinds of insurance, it's not even close, folks. The stock market has beaten everything badly beyond inflation. So if you want a higher return on your money and you're willing to take the risk, as you diversify at the lowest possible cost, you will end up with a lot more money, either for your needs if you live a long time, or for your heirs who that money will be left to. So when I talk about time horizon, by the way, some of you may have a time horizon of 150 years. And you're thinking, how in the hell does that work? Well, because your grandkids, maybe they're not even born yet. Maybe they are, and they're 2 years old. You could actually be investing for money that they're going to be using. So be thinking about that. Now, if your goal is to spend every dollar you got before you're dead, well, that's your goal. That's fine, right? Then that may change it a little bit. But what I'm talking about, and what we'll be talking about this week and next week, is trying to make sure you have money left before you are gone. Because again, whether you want to leave money to someone else or not, you just want to make sure you don't run out of money before you do. Just take the time to understand your particular situation. It's a big one. So say somebody, they get this whole idea that, they have a big pension, it's going to be a big bond. And so they decide that they're going to keep 80% of their money in stocks. And a friend of theirs who don't have a pension, and they're keeping 50% of their portfolio in stocks going into, and they're going, oh my God, how can you be so risky? Dude, you don't even know my situation. Right? So be very careful when talking to people, friends, could be loved ones, and they'll spout off for certain things, and they don't know your situation. Okay? I like to kind of tease mothers. Mothers are good at that. Oh, now, be careful, right? Well, mom, it's going to be okay. Mom just wants you to be safe. Don't get hurt. But, mom, I need money when I'm old, so I got to take risk. And if your mom takes a risk, even though they may cause a little discomfort, education can reduce some of that discomfort. So here's an example, 80-20 mix. Consider putting 50% total stock market index fund. So that owns the entire U.S. economy. Put about 30% international index fund. 10% in the total bond, high quality index fund. So high quality U.S. and corporate bonds. So when stocks are going down, this is the kind of bond fund that goes up. So it keeps you afloat when stocks are going down. And then maybe 10% in a money market fund. So if somebody wanted an 80-20 allocation, you could do it with 4 funds. Or you could do it at Vanguard if you wanted to. That's what I do. I consolidate all my money at Vanguard when I retired. So it's easy, it's accessible, it's understandable, and I can withdraw it when I need it in retirement. So that's how you put together an 80-20 allocation if that works for you. And that's going to cost you maybe 0.06. Entire portfolio is going to be about 0.06 because that first fund's at 0.04, 0.11, 0.05, and 0.16 combined with the numbers. So an entire portfolio. Lexi, help me out. Somebody had $500,000 in their portfolio and they ran it 80-20 mix. And it's going to cost them 0.06. How much is 0.06 of $500,000? As she's working on that. 70-30 mix. What do you got? How much? 30,000? Oh, hell no. How much? 3,000 sounds a little high. 0.06. $300. It's okay. We'll work on those math skills. It's okay. It's okay. We'll get there. We'll get there. So somebody, think about this for a minute. Somebody's got $500,000 and their portfolio is costing them 0.06. They're paying $300 a year to manage that portfolio. That's it. Place like Vanguard. So by squeezing out the cost, you increase the return over time. That's one example of an 80-20 mix. Here's a 70-30 mix. So all we've done here, we've added a little bit of bonds. So instead of 10, we now have 20%. We cut back a little bit international, we added a little bit bonds. So if you think you're going to be a 70-30 person, which is fine, that might be the mix that might work for you. But you might decide, I think I'm more of a 60-40 person. Well, we take a little bit out of the total stock, we add to the bond, see how the bond's going up as we reduce the volatility of the portfolio, but we're also going to be reducing the return a little bit too. You can't reduce stocks and think returns are going to go up. They're not going to go up, they're going to go down, but the volatility is going to go down as well. So here's where you're trying to figure out the right mix for you. And what you don't want to be, you don't want to be that person that I hear from on occasion. Finley, I don't take much risk. I want like a 10% return. Dude, go get on a unicorn, okay? That shit doesn't work. Doesn't work, okay? So if you're going to get a decent return, you have to take a decent amount of risk. The question is, what's the right risk for you? So there's 60-40. There's 50-50. So now we've added even more cash. We've reduced our stock allocations. And again, some of this could be as you head into later retirement. In other words, your allocations can change based on your life changing. I wouldn't get too worked up about your age. Age is one variable. It's not the only variable. There are many variables to consider when you're looking at your asset allocation, including a spouse. So, you know, I'm going to go out on a limb and say husband, wife, they're not always on the same sheet of music. Now, maybe, but not always. In other words, one person may be a lot more aggressive than the other. Well, you may have to find some compromise. And that's what marriage is about, right? Compromise. So consider as you go through this, I would almost say to you, let's say if you're married, both of you, like quietly to yourselves, figure out what you think the right asset allocation is for you, and then come together and tell the spouse and see how close those two numbers match. Get to know each other in that way. Get to know each other with your asset allocation. Okay, now we're going down to 40% stock. See how we've increased the bonds and the cash, and we've reduced the total stock and the total international stock. And by reducing stock, we've reduced return, but we've also reduced volatility. And then finally, we go to a 30% stock allocation. So the point of this past few slides, this stuff's not that hard. Don't let people paint it out to be really, really difficult. You could own 4, 5, maybe 6 funds, but these 4 will do you just fine. At about 0.06, 0.07 maybe, your portfolio could run quite efficiently. You'd be diversified all over the world in stocks. You'd have high quality bonds, and you'd have amount of cash that you need for your needs. Notice I have this money in a money market fund. So how many people keep their savings in the bank or credit union? Okay, it's okay. I see hands go up. Well, am I in trouble for? No, it's up to you, right? But where you're earning, make sure you're getting some interest. If you're earning squat, well, why? Why put money in the bank? Because you know what's happening. Well, right? The bank, they're loaning out your money. So they give you 0.2 and they loan it out at 5, 6, 7%. What kind of deal is that? You make money on your money. Don't let other people make money on your money. Put money into a prime money market fund at Vanguard, earning 2.5% right now, just about 2.49 compounded. And you can access it whenever you want. It's cash. It's your liquid assets to access as you need, and we'll talk about withdrawing funds next week. But at least you're earning about 2.5%. You're earning something close to the inflation rate. Something the bank, credit union, not going to do for you. Yes. No. That's correct. FDIC insurance is a guarantee to earn less money. That's what that is. Transfer to Vanguard. So, yes, sir.
What does the FDIC guarantee that actually guarantee?
They'll guarantee up to a certain amount of money, $250,000. But again, you're guaranteed to earn basically nothing. Prime money market at Vanguard has never broken the bank. What that means is they've never not paid you the interest they owed you with your principal, ever.
What circumstances will the FDIC Insurance Corporation need paid back?
The bank goes bust, embezzlement within the bank. There could be all kinds of reasons. Yeah. And again, it's people have this sense of, I want extra security. Well, you pay for that extra security with much lower returns.
You can be an online bank, FDIC insured, paying over 2%.
And that's fine, right? Oh, there are, so by all means, if you can find something out there that's paying a decent rate, go find it. I'm not knocking that. What I'm telling you is the prime money market at Vanguard is paying about 2.5%. So either go find something better than that, or go look at that. But don't accept 0.2% on your money, because the bank's making money off you, And screw that. That's your money. Do something with it that serves you instead of them. And again, I'm not trying to hate on banks or credit unions. They're going to do what's best for their bottom line. You do what's best for your bottom line. So Vanguard, you pay no loads. So there's no Vanguard salesman walking through that door. You're never going to pay him a load, ever, because he doesn't exist. So your money is going straight to Vanguard, straight to the investments. There's no middleman between you and your investments. And those investments are contained within a mutual fund. You'll pay ultra low fees. Now, by the way, Vanguard has hundreds of mutual funds. Most of them you don't need. I mean, they may be low cost managed funds. You don't need them. You only need a very small amount of index funds that fit your needs. And again, if I haven't said it, Vanguard does not pay me. Sure, it sounds like they do. They don't pay me. Vanguard does it better than anybody I know. They've been doing it for so long because of the way John Bogle built the company. If somebody did it better than Vanguard, by all means, I'd recommend them. Consolidate and simplify. It's a big deal. You tell me. Maybe some of you are different than me. But as we age, do we want more complication? No, hell no. We want less. Simple. Simple is good. And you can consolidate and simplify in one location with one custodian. Transfer process can be challenging. So what does that mean? It can be a pain in the ass. These companies have this idea somehow at some point that your money is their money. And they don't like to let it go. It's like they hold on to it real tight and you got to pull it away. Well, you can do that. You can. Not always easy, but you can do that. And I would encourage you to look at transferring money from high-cost funds to low-cost funds, either at Vanguard or other places like Fidelity or Schwab. So here's an example. We got 30 years on a $300,000 initial investment with no new money, right? So $300,000 is a start. Somebody's paying 3% a year. Somebody's paying 1.25, 0.7, and 0.06. So you may not be able to see very well. Just keep in mind 3, 1.25, 0.7, 0.06. What's it look like after 30 years? And again, you think, well, that's not bad, 700,000. But that's a 3% a year. At 1.25, at 0.7, and at 0.06. I'm sure you notice it's $1 million difference. That's $1 million, and that 3% number, I got news for you, on their investment portfolio. Somebody's getting rich off of your money, and it's not you. So those fees are incredibly important. And again, this was a 6% return. If I would have run these numbers at, say, 8%, it would have been more extreme. Fees have a huge impact on our return on investment. If you're averaging 6% a year and you're paying 3% a year in fees, that's 50% of your return is coming out in fees. That is not the way to grow wealth over time. Not the way to build your account. It's a way to build somebody else's account. Always listen to this guy. So when the greatest investor of our time tells us how to do this in a smart way, we should listen. We should always listen. And when there's somebody in our life that counteracts what he's saying, whether that's a local life insurance agent or uncle or the local yokel financial advisor, it could be anybody. You're going to listen to them over him? I mean, really? Why would we do that? And somebody may say, well, that's not how he made his money. Well, no shit. You and I are not Warren Buffett. We should not try to be Warren Buffett. We should listen to Warren Buffett because he actually does have our best interest at heart. He understands how markets work. He understands the industry. He's providing you guidance on how to do better for you. You and I should listen. So keep it simple. Start with a total stock index fund, add an international index fund, add a total bond market index fund. Those three funds, you'll be just fine. You'll beat the vast majority of people. Just figure out the right allocations that you desire. And again, you could do this at Schwab, at Fidelity, or Vanguard. All three of those custodians offer very low index funds. Just be careful. You go to Schwab, especially Fidelity, they're going to try to upsell you. They're going to try to tell you about all the managed funds that beat the indexes. They're not going to tell you about the vast majority that didn't. They're going to try to push their advisory services on you, something Vanguard won't do. They're not going to try to upsell you. So be careful with this. People will try to confuse you with the subject. You can add a real estate index fund. You can add a small cap value index fund. So I do. Do you have to? No. The reason why you would consider adding real estate, because it's a bigger part of the economy than what's reflected in the total stock market index fund. So the real economy might be 10% real estate, but the total stock is only about 4% real estate. So you add real estate to get the real U.S. economy, and the negative correlated asset class in many cases, meaning when the stock market, the big companies in the U.S. are going down, real estate can go up. So we like to have those things in our portfolio going up and down, kind of like the seesaw. So real estate can certainly be an option to add. So can small cap value. So small cap value index, small companies that are undervalued. People don't seem to like them for one reason or another. Well, historically, it's averaged about 15% a year, while the stock market's averaged 10. So adding a little bit extra small cap value might squeeze a little more return out of your portfolio without taking a whole lot more risk. Again, do you have to do that? No. But historically, we found those pieces, you can actually reduce volatility and increase returns slightly. If you add those pieces, just make them a small piece of the portfolio, maybe 10% of your stock allocation. And again, if you want to understand the depth of some of this information, I have books up here that you can take a look at. The investment class goes into more depth on these subjects. So you can learn as much as you want to learn, so you really start to understand in depth how this stuff works. Because here's what I know. The more you learn, it's like you build this bubble of knowledge around you. So when the crap comes your way, it just bounces off. And there's a whole lot of crap. Right, Sharon? There's a whole lot of crap. And of course, add that money market as you need to, paying almost 2.5% right now. You add more money in a prime money market, cash, as your cash needs go up. If your cash needs are down, you don't need much, then you minimize how much money you keep in cash, and you put more money in your high quality bonds and stocks. Some recommended Vanguard funds. That's the prime money market down there. But that's the name of those funds. That's what they own. Again, with those funds, you're diversified all over the world at a very, very, very low price. So you've accomplished the asset allocation mix and the cost. And your future is looking brighter by the minute. Now, does that mean it goes straight to the moon? Well, of course not. Right? You could do asset allocation just right, squeeze your costs perfectly, and the market can go down. And it does go down on occasion. So we're not talking that an all index portfolio is a savior to make money through every time period. What I'm telling you is you make more money when times are good and you lose less when times are bad. And over time, that ends up being a whole lot of money in your account. Taxes and investing. So deferred taxes. We'll be talking about taxes more later in this 8 weeks. But tonight, right, pretty simple. Put money in traditional to defer tax to in the future. Put money in Roth to eliminate tax in the future. Have tax-efficient index funds outside of retirement. So if you have a bucket, a non-retirement bucket, keep tax-efficient funds in there. The total stock market index fund, the total international stock index funds are two wonderfully tax-efficient funds. They produce very little taxes in the year that you make money, and they produce a whole lot of long-term capital gains that you'll pay tax on later at a lower rate, and that rate could be 0. It's all about filling up those buckets. Filling up those buckets. So having 3 buckets can give you flexibility in retirement. A pre-tax bucket, which many of you will have, your normal 401k that I would turn into an IRA. A Roth bucket, Roth IRA, Roth 401k. And then a non-retirement bucket, which is money outside of retirement. Sometimes money comes into there because of an inheritance. You sell home because of maybe you've had other money that you've maxed out your retirement accounts and you put more money in that bucket. So get yourself 3 buckets. You're going to have more options in retirement. And that flexibility is going to provide you, what I would tell you, less stress in retirement as well. Because you get to almost choose how much you're going to be taxed when you're pulling money out of retirement accounts. Again, it's something we'll talk about more next week. Rebalancing. This simply means that, in my case, I'm an 80-20 guy. And so if my portfolio goes down or up by 10%, I use the threshold method. It goes up to 90% stocks or 70% stocks because I was putting in money or I was withdrawing money. Markets went up, markets went down. Then I'm going to get back in there and I'm going to rebalance back to my 80% allocation. I'm going to do it inside a retirement account so there's no tax consequences. Rebalancing we'll talk about more in later weeks, but I want to at least talk about it briefly here because it's important. Rebalancing is one of those things that, believe me, it's smart. You want to keep your asset allocation where you want it, but it can be hard because what that means is you're selling your winners and you're buying your losers. And the human psyche says, no, I want more winners. I want less losers. And you're having to do the opposite when you rebalance. It forces you to sell high and buy low, which is exactly what we want to do when our portfolio gets out of balance. So an example, right? Let's say somebody's a 70-30 person. Stocks have zoomed up to 81%. They're doing great. But once they hit over 80, they go back and they sell those stocks. Let's say it was international that went up so much, international stocks. So they sell mostly international stocks and they end up buying bonds or cash that's gone down. Because generally the bonds are going to go down as stocks go up. Now, this is usually when somebody says, well, I want them all to go up at the same time, Finley. Yeah. Well, when you do that, guess what? They all go down at the same time. You don't want that. So you don't want everything down at the same time and up at the same time. You don't want that. You want things in the portfolio that work in negative correlated ways. So rebalancing is a smart strategy. Put it in your head. Try to work through it without emotion. Yeah, I think that's crap, but okay. So that's somebody, they're trying to tell you when markets have historically done, they're trying to paint the market like it's readable, like you can tell what the future holds. We can't. So what I would tell you is the best advice that I would give is you identify a strategy. Either use a threshold strategy, which is mine, so 10% either way, or use a yearly rebalancing. That's perfectly fine. Every January, 15th, I'm going to go in there and rebalance back to my allocation. Even if I'm only out of whack by 2 or 3%, I'm going to get right back, in this case, to 70-30. But I'm going to do it every January 15th. That's perfectly fine, too. But you see how we're taking emotions out? And I didn't pick January 15th because it's in the first quarter, right? I picked it because you pick any date. I could throw a chart and say, okay, whatever, August 12th. I'll do it on that date. But you stick to that. You have a plan, that's your rebalancing plan, and you do it. And you take emotion out of it. Yeah. Try to take timing. The whole idea that somehow we're going to know, by the way, we will know. We always know the best time to rebalance when we look back in time, which is what that guy's doing. He's looking back in time and saying, well, you should, well, yeah, no shit. We can all do that. We can all look back, oh, I wish I'd have done that. We don't know the future. So that's why we own many asset classes, and then we get them at the desired allocations and let markets do their magic. And sometimes an asset class is going to do well, and we're thinking, man, I wish I had more of that. But then all of a sudden, the asset class isn't doing so well. So I don't know if I like that so much. In other words, you may own international stock in your portfolio, and it may go down this year, and it may go down this year, and you're thinking, why do I own that? Well, because you didn't know that. You didn't know it was going to go down. It could have gone up. You own those assets. So whatever goes up, you've got it. And yes, some of your assets will go down. That's okay. Resources, right? So my book's What Colors the Sky is a book on investing. Graduation is a book on retirement. Little book, Common Sense Investing by John Bogle. Solon's book, and The Investor's Manifesto. Wonderful books. Books that will guide you down the right path. They will educate you without selling you. These are smart people who know what they're talking about. My books, it's like a conglomeration of about 80 authors, right? I take all these books and I put it together in a hopefully simple way that you can understand and apply to your life. And then I provide you a glossary in the back so you can understand some of the terminology, so you can piece this stuff together. So at some point you say, aha, I got it, Finley. It just took me a little while, okay? So take some time, read, expose yourself to the information. This class, the other classes will make more and more sense. I promise you. It's almost like seeing a world that maybe you didn't know existed. That light becomes brighter and brighter as your level of knowledge and understanding happens. So build on what you learn. You can go to my website, learn more on the investment link. Read that book. You can sign up for the Financial Happiness Academy. This is going to be available via an audio, video and audio. So you can actually watch this class again. You can learn more about. Basically, they're my notes of these classes that might help you consolidate this information in your brain. And at the end of the day, just believe in yourself. Believe that you can take control of your life as you take control of your money. Just take that step in saying, I'll give it a shot. I may not know everything, but I've learned a little bit, and I'm going to keep learning. And I'm going to make sure that I keep learning from the right sources. People that are not going to try to feed my fear, my greed. They're not going to try to sell me something that isn't in my best interest. They're going to try to provide me something of value, knowledge, that I can use to make for a better life. Those are the people you want to learn from. Okay, a lot of talking. Before I answer questions, as a reminder, I have different cards up here from some fee-only financial advisors. So something I'm going to talk about more in the investment class. I told you to stay away from fee-based advisors, but if you really need an advisor, you need somebody because, you know, yeah, Finley, you tell me I can do it myself, but I'm just not totally sure. A fee-only advisor is somebody who charges you a fee, either money under management or an hourly fee or a project, but that's it. That's how they get paid. They don't push products to you. Then there's some cards up here from 4 different fee-only advisors that you call them up, meet with them at no cost, see if you'd be a good fit for them. Okay? Okay, questions. Questions anything pop in your head that you'd like to talk about? Yes, sir.
Okay, if you're in a, like a target date fund, and its published expense ratio is less than 1%. But that is a fund of funds. So if you dig down into those underlying funds, they have their own expense ratio. So is the published 1% expense ratio of target date fund accurate? Or is it
It is accurate. It is. Because it's still a conglomeration of all of them combined. Now, what I would tell you is 1% is ridiculous. Okay, I'm glad you did. So, target date funds at Vanguard are generally 0.13, 0.14, 0.15. So, and they own those index funds. And so, for instance, let's use the 2030 fund. I believe it's 0.14. Well, they own the total stock at 0.04. They own the international at 0.11. They own the total bond at 0.10, I think, and the international bond, and the total U.S. bond at 0.05. So all of them are lower than 0.13, but the cost of pulling all them in inside this target date fund ends up costing you 0.13, which is still a hell of a deal. But be careful with target date funds. They come in all kinds of flavors and all kinds of costs. So 1% is very possible for many target date funds. In other words, you know if the target date fund or life cycle fund, you know if they own index funds by the cost. If the cost is under 0.2, they're index funds because they can't do it that cheap with managed funds. If that cost is 0.5, 0.6, 0.8, most likely they're managed funds. Yeah, you just get in there and dig. That's right. It's all there. They have what's called a prospectus. Dig in there, take a look, research yourself. The more you can understand what you own, the better off you're going to be. Because that's part of the process of owning and understanding your asset allocation and your cost. Other questions? Yes, sir.
So when you're doing a rebalance, going from bonds back up to stock may be a little bit easier, depending upon what your portfolio looks like. But if you have a portfolio that has small cap, large cap, total index, is there a way that you have to go into research as to which one you're going to pull from to move back down to bonds when you're rebalancing?
Yeah. So I would keep it real simple. And again, this is hard. It sounds simple when I say it. You sell the ones that have gone up the most. So in percentage terms, the stock fund that's done the very best, that's the one you're selling. And you know, the head says, no, Finley, no, that thing is awesome. Well, it was awesome. That doesn't mean it's going to continue to be awesome. So you sell the high flyers. Not necessarily. So we're a little deeper here, but you like a desired allocation for each stock fund you have. So each stock fund, let's say, is at 25% allocation, and it's at 27. Maybe you drop it to 25, and you drop the next one to 25. You drop them enough to where they're supposed to be, and you're doing it automatic. You're still selling more of the biggest winners because you're getting them back to the desired allocations that you originally set. And I know I just went a little deep there, but the point is you sell the biggest winners to buy the biggest losers. That is rational, that is smart, we know that, and it can be hard. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I want to move my money from 401k to an and it's a lot of money to me. Is it better to put it all in like a money market and slowly move into those funds, or do I just have to?
Okay. I've gotten that question a lot. So let's first say to move money out of a 401k while you're working, for many people, it's not going to be possible. While you're working, they're going to require you to keep it there. Some plan programs will let you take money out after 59.5 or after 62 or after 65. So you want to identify that, right? But when you're moving money out, the big question is, do I put a big chunk of money in my money market cash, and then do I dollar cost average it in over a period of time, or do I just put it all in and like close my eyes? So here's what we know. The research would tell us you put it all in and close your eyes. And here's why. markets have historically gone up about 75% of the time. So if the majority of that money is going to be going into stocks and you take your time going into stocks, well, the odds are you're going to end up with less. Saying that, you might feel better to dollar cost average that money in. In other words, you might, because if that market goes down, you're going to be, oh my God, I should have done that. Where's Finley? I'm going to kill him, right? So it's natural to have that feeling. And so if you're going to feel better, then okay, it's not the end of the world, but have a plan. So if you're going to put that money in over time, pick a time period. So my advice would be 12 months, every month, and you pick a day of the month. Don't go guessing, right? Oh, I think this is right. No, don't do that. That's crazy, right? So if you pick the 5th of the month, every 5th of the month, 1/12 of that amount goes in. And it goes into your allocations. Why this is easier is if you put it, if you're, let's say, a 70-30 person, and you put all that money in 70-30, boom, all in one lump, well, you've set your allocations, and then you let markets do what they do. And something's probably going to go down, but something's probably going to go up. So in my world, I would set it and be done with it. But I get it. For some of you, that's a little too scary, so dollar cost it in with a very specific plan as you do it. Yeah. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Well, do that, okay, if you want to put 401k into your IRA, can we put it part of it into our Roth and pay taxes on part of it?
Okay, so we're talking about Roth conversions. So if you move some of your pre-tax money to a Roth IRA, generally speaking, the best way to do that is you move a 401k to an IRA, let's say at Vanguard, and then you do a Roth conversion. That's okay, but you're going to pay taxes on that money, and that's a chunk. So if you're going to move $5,000, maybe you could do that. It's not going to have a big tax ramification, but you move 50,000 bucks, it's like you just made 50,000 bucks, right? So we're going to be very careful with Roth conversions. So there are times when Roth conversions can be a good idea, i.e. you're not making that much money and you're actually doing conversions, so you're only paying a small amount of tax when you convert. That's an approach one could use. But you want to be very careful when turning pre-tax money into Roth money because there's a tax consequence to doing that. Any other questions? Yep. So the good news is Vanguard got rid of investor shares. So it used to be Vanguard investor shares were $3,000. You need $3,000 to start them, and you needed $10,000 to start Admiral shares. Some of you older people, if you remember, Admiral shares used to be $100,000. I had a party first time I hit 100. I was like, this is awesome. And then a few years later, they dropped the 100,000 minimum to 10,000. It's like, oh, well, not that great of a deal. So, Admiral shares now has been dropped to 3,000. And the reason why that's a good thing, you get the lowest cost shares at Vanguard in Admiral shares. So the total stock market index fund used to be 0.04, a little bit higher actually, at $100,000. Then it dropped to 10,000 to get 0.04. Now it's dropped to 3,000 to get 0.04. So Admiral shares have been dropped down to $3,000 minimums to get that lowest cost share at Vanguard in your personal account. So what they said was when they made that conversion, they would do it for you after a few months if you didn't do it yourself. I would always convert. And they ask you, do you want to convert? Well, say, do I want to pay it less? Yeah. But yes, always focus on Admiral shares, $3,000. So the target date funds at Vanguard, they're going to cost $1,000 to get started. And then when you hit 3,000, I would consider converting to a particular index. Yes, sir.
Transferring advantage of equities fund to a Vanguard. Describe the process.
Can be smooth, it can be a pain in the butt, right? So you can have some Vanguard, you can actually have them get the money, and they'll either bring it over in kind, meaning the managed fund that you own somewhere else, it shows up at Vanguard in your account, the actual fund. And then you would sell that fund, if it's a retirement account, let's say, move it into cash, and then buy a Vanguard index fund. Or That money may came over in cash. They may sell it previously, comes over in cash, and then you buy your index funds. So there's a process.
So you advocate having Vanguard do it rather than contact the person.
It varies. So I've helped a lot of people do this. Some people don't really want to talk to their guy. It's like, can I do this without talking to him? Yes, you can. Oh, thank you. Right. So, yes, you're not required to really deal with your past advisors or custodians. You can deal directly with Vanguard, and for the most part, just get it all moved over. Now, somebody may be giving you a call. What's wrong? Oh, nothing. I'm taking control. Thank you. Bye.
When you help me do mine, we try to move it just as it was, and then she may have those,
Yes.
so then we have to sell it beforehand.
Yes, because they needed that. They're going to get that money. So what they can do, right? Some of them will nickel and dime you on the way out. Well, don't be surprised by that, right? That's another sign while you're leaving. You're leaving them because that's how they do business. Vanguard's not going to nickel and dime you coming in or going out. And again, right? Don't come at this like, man, Finley just loves Vanguard. I love the way they do business. They really are focused on doing what's best for us. And it's all based on how John Bogle set the whole company up, which was it services the investor before the business. Okay. So next week, we'll be talking about applying that 4% rule. People ask me all the time, it's like, Finley, nobody ever talked about like drawing money in retirement. Well, that's what we're going to talk about. Accessing it, understanding RMDs, required minimum distributions that you have to start taking out at 70.5 from pre-tax retirement accounts. Continuing our discussion on asset allocation. So how do you deal with asset allocation far into retirement? And then again, rebalancing as you withdraw money. So as you put money out for your needs, boom, you're rebalancing as you do that. And then how do you do it if you get an inheritance or something else happens where money is actually coming to you instead of coming out? So we'll talk about all those issues as it relates to a portfolio. And then my story tonight is called The Meeting. And you'll see it's a very specific date. It's a date that I internally celebrate every year. It was October 2nd, 1989. I was in Germany. I was 25 years old. And that was the day I fired my financial advisor. It was a great day. So, like I said, I was 25, and my financial advisor was some old guy. He was like 45. And I go into his office, and I'm a little scared. You know, I was like, because I had spent months reading and understanding the crap that I was owning, and I knew I had to change. I knew what I had to do. I really did understand it, but it's tough to tell somebody that you're done with them. And so I walk in there, and you know, I tell him that I'm moving on, and he almost starts talking to me like I'm his kid. And I just said, stop. I told you, it's my money, sell it, and I'll be back here in a few days to get it. And I just cut him off. And you know, I didn't do that. I didn't do that to adults as a 25-year-old, but somehow I got the courage up at that moment to say I was going to take control of my life as I took control of my investments. And as I shut that door, I just felt like Hercules. You know, now granted, I was broke, right? I still own the same crap. He hadn't sold it just yet. And so I'm still having to invest for my future. And I mean, I had a long ways to go, but at that moment, I could sense that my life was going to change because I was starting to take control of it. And, you know, that's a historical date for me. And maybe for some of you, you'll have your historical date. That date when you start to take control of and your life. It's a big one, and I wish it upon you. Thank you, folks. Don't forget to put your name in the hat if you haven't, folks.